Welcome to the Fantasy Trading Room, hosted by Faceoff Sports Network. And today we're going to be breaking down positional rankings and tiers for every single position, not only running backs, but wide receivers, quarterbacks, and tight ends, as well as we're going to be doing buy sells, looking over the fantasy football landscape in general, and just talking fantasy with you guys. Now, in the weeks following, we have some guests on. Hopefully, week 2, we'll have a big guest on. Week 3, we already have some big guests planned out. But the goal is to just talk about the fantasy landscape and condense these rankings into a 30-minute or less podcast / YouTube video for you guys to enjoy. Now, I know most ranking videos is by position. Those are 30 minutes long, which means if you want to watch every position, that's about 2 hours long. And that's just too much. We're putting this out on a Saturday. It's one day before kickoff where all the madness happens, and you need to know everything about fantasy football. So, obviously, you have your Thursday game. But if you really want to cram information and just get what you need to know, this is the podcast for you. But with that said, let's dive into our first position rank and talk about the top 24 running backs ahead of week 1. So for week 1, my positional rankings are up on screen. If you guys do want to find these rankings before this video is live on YouTube, I know Thursday games, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to get these out before them because of scheduling issues with our guests and just how long it takes to create these graphics. But if you want to find these rankings before Thursday, the quarterback / tight end rankings will be dropping hopefully Thursday morning, and the running back and wide receiver rankings will be dropping Wednesday morning on Faceoff Sports Network. Just look up Steve Bradshaw Fantasy. It'll be up there on my author page, or you can just head over to the Faceoff Sports Network website. That will be linked below, and it should be at the very top of the homepage. But with that said, let's dive into our S tier. We have McCaffrey and Eckler. I mean, there's not really much to talk about. These are the top dogs. Now, I actually do have Bijan ahead of Eckler for this year overall. But, Bijan Robinson is a phenomenal prospect, but who knows how much Arthur Smith is actually going to implement him in week 1. I personally don't like Arthur Smith and how he runs this offense, so you never know. It is a possibility that Tyler Algier and Cordell Patterson could see a significant amount of touches to start. I mean, there's no way that they're not going to feed Bijan like a bell cow unless Arthur Smith wants to lose his job, which at this point, by how he shoots Kyle Pitts, may be pretty accurate. But besides Eckler and Bijan, there really shouldn't be too many surprises. We have Saquon at 3, Bijan 4, Pollard 5, Chubb 6, Jacob 7, and Derrick Henry 8. I think these are all pretty fair rankings, and there's not really too much to talk about. We also have a tier drop to Etienne or Ramondre. I think they are very similar players, and they are going to both rely on their pass catching. I'm not particularly high in Etienne this year. I have him around the RB12 range, and I'm higher on Ramondre. But Tank Bigsby is legitimately talented. However, he's probably not going to see much work in week 1. I mean, the Chiefs game just ended, and we saw Patrick Mahomes try and carry an absolutely god-awful Chiefs receiving corps to a win. And with no Kelce, they just look terrible. Kadarius Toney looked like he's never played football. And that is why I have never drafted him this offseason in an underdog. I don't want to take my victory lap just yet, but he looks terrible. And the Lions came out with a surprise win. But the point of that was that DeAndre Swift, who is a much better talent than Tank Bigsby, obviously, he was the 12th pick in the draft, was not really used that much. And obviously, Etienne is very talented, and he's definitely more talented than David Montgomery at this point in his career. So it just doesn't make sense how Tank Bigsby is going to see a large chunk of the work, especially week 1. But I'm just going to be highlighting my start of the week, and that is going to come at number 11 in J.K. Dobbins. J.K. Dobbins should have an absolute field day this week. They take on the Houston Texans at home. The Texans are probably one of the worst teams in the league. We have the Commanders taking on the Arizona Cardinals as well. But I think the Ravens should destroy the Texans more than, the Commanders can destroy the Cardinals. And J.K. Dobbins is a great player. I've talked about him all offseason. You can read any article I wrote and hear my write-up and rave about J.K. Dobbins. I am probably the leader of the J.K. Dobbins fan club by now. But the bottom line is he has good draft capital. He was hyper efficient in college in his first 2 seasons, 6 yards per carry his rookie year, and 5.7 in year 2. He's been dealing with injuries, but now that he's back, I don't see why he shouldn't dominate. The bottom line is the Ravens should absolutely blow the Texans out of the water, and they're just going to be able to run the ball whenever they want in the second half and really the whole game. But they're just going to slow the game down because they'll already be beating the Texans by 28 at halftime. But besides Dobbins, I also have Najee in this tier as well as Joe Mixon, Ken Walker, and Jahmyr Gibbs. Jahmyr Gibbs had, around 7 points per game. So we can quickly reflect and say it probably wasn't the smartest ranking, but I honestly feel like it's kind of, maybe I should have dropped him down the D tier and moved him all the way down to 18. But I feel like that we thought Jahmyr Gibbs was going to get, I am a Jahmyr Gibbs. I'm not necessarily a Jahmyr Gibbs hater. I don't hate him. Obviously, if he is my RB15, that's not terrible. But I'm not as high on him as others because I think Montgomery is going to see a role in the offense. And I know it's week 1, but that's exactly what happened. The bottom line is Jahmyr Gibbs wasn't used as a pass catcher at all. I think he only had 2 catches for 18 yards. So I was banking in that, he wouldn't get the rushing attempts, but they're going to be trailing to the Chiefs. They're going to have to throw a lot. Jahmyr Gibbs is going to be out there because they're going to be running a lot of plays, trying to play catch up. But obviously, the Chiefs did not look very good, and that's not happening at all. So it was a good prediction, I think. And I mean, it's not like I put him as the RB8 and he just dropped 7 points. But Kenneth Walker's a guy that I'm liking more and more as the year goes on and people get lower and lower on him because they like Zach Charbonnet. Now, don't get me wrong. I hated Kenneth Walker at the beginning of the offseason, but especially in week 1, I would start Walker because it's going to take Charbonnet time to get acclimated with this offense. He's missed time during training camp. As we talked about, Charbonnet is not the same level of prospect as Gibbs, who was a first-round pick, and we saw how involved he was in week 1. Then dropping down, we have Aaron Jones, Madison, and then a whole tier of guys. That actually separated. We have Akers through Pierce in the E tier, and then we'll call Cook through Brian Robinson F tier. Pacheco, let me just touch on him real quick. I know this is kind of going a little long into the running backs, but Pacheco caught 4 balls. And McKinnon, who I've been high in this offseason because it was they had clearly defined roles. McKinnon was out there in the passing work in the red zone. And the Chiefs offense, which I think is going to pass a lot in the red zone, as I did last year, just makes sense. But Pacheco caught 4 passes, so I may have to be moving him up my ranks closer to the season as we progress on. But not a bad start by Pacheco at all to week 1. I probably should have had him a little higher than this. So next, let's move on to the wide receiver tiers. And then making myself a little pat in the back real quick before we start. We have Amon-Ra St. Brown at 4. I know that's not crazy, but a lot of people were saying that, he shouldn't be in the same tier as Jefferson, Hill, and Chase for week 1. And while obviously for the rest of the season, he's not even close. He's not at the same level as those guys. It's probably Jefferson and Chase at a tier by themselves anyway, without even Hill. But I was betting on Amon-Ra to, be heavily involved because they're going to be trailing, and that's not exactly what happened. But the bottom line is Amon-Ra dominated week 1, and he had the upside and the ceiling to get 20 points per game, which is exactly what happened. I believe he had 19 in PPR formats. He had that touchdown, which was absolutely great to see, but give myself a little nice pat in the back for putting Amon-Ra up with those elite options that can put up 20-plus points. He had the upside. It wasn't exactly the game script that helped him, but in this week, he definitely had the upside, and that was a nice little, victory win by me. But again, we don't really need to talk about Jefferson, Hill, Chase. That's all pretty self-explanatory. And then dropping down with Devontae Adams, I really don't mind Adams compared to other guys, but he has a decent matchup this week going up against the Denver Broncos. The Raiders have historically been good against the Broncos. I think Jacobs should eat, even though he may be a little slower due to all the time he's missed. But the Raiders are a bad team, but the Broncos aren't necessarily great either. So I don't mind this matchup week 1. Then we have CeeDee Lamb, Stephon Diggs, Garrett Wilson. Again, I honestly like CeeDee Lamb a lot as well. I think the Giants should put up a close game. The spread is 2.5 at the moment, so it's projected to be a close game. And I really like Diggs. He's playing the Jets, which honestly, I don't see why this isn't being viewed as a shootout. I think we have Garrett Wilson at 8, Diggs at 7. Obviously, Diggs, I think, is more talented than Garrett Wilson. Diggs is my wide receiver 5 on the year, and for a good reason. He has an incredible ceiling and a very high floor as well. But this game should be a shootout, and I want a piece of Diggs. Garrett Wilson, it's just that I think Adams and Lamb are going to be the alpha targets that are going to be playing in just a great situation. And I'm not necessarily sure how this game should go, but I could even see myself moving Diggs and Wilson to the top of this tier. Now that we talk it out a little more, dropping down, we have Waddle and A.J. Brown. And I think this is pretty fair. This tier is just elite options in good situation this week. Waddle, for example, is going up against the Chargers. And that is the second highest over-under score besides the Chiefs and Lions, which wasn't even that high scoring. So it'll probably be the highest scoring game of the week at that point. But I want a piece of this game. Waddle is a beast. There's not too much to say besides Waddle is efficient and just good at football. He's not the alpha like other guys in this tier, other guys around him. We have Tyreek Hill still in this offense. But Waddle is just good at football. He's going to score fancy points. Tua's back. It's a shootout. That's why he's here. A.J. Brown is a dog. We have Olave, and I think he is going to ball out this season. I love Olave. I'm drafting him everywhere. Then we have Amari Cooper, who I think has a solid matchup there going up against the Bengals. It's going to be a close game. I think the Browns should trail. But again, I honestly probably should wait to see Watson before we rank him this high because he was pretty bad last season. But I think it's a good situation to where it makes sense to start him off the gate and then be like, oh, if he doesn't perform, we might have to reassess this. Then we got Higgins, Keenan Allen. I don't mind DK Metcalf, Devonta Smith. I normally don't like, or Calvin Ridley, but they all have fine matchups and have the same ceiling. And in maybe Ridley's case, even higher than Watson. But dropping down, we have DJ Moore, Mike Williams, Deebo Samuel, Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, and DeAndre Hopkins. Let's just touch on Evans and Godwin real quick. They're in a solid situation where they're going to be having to play from behind against the Vikings. I think the Vikings should lead the NFL in pass attempts. But at the same time, who knows what Baker Mayfield's going to do? Who knows if he's good at football? So, question mark. I have them as low wide receiver 2s, but I think if you're chasing upside, I would definitely put them in your starting lineup as a low wide receiver 2 or a flex spot. Let's head over to the QB tiers and rankings. At number 1, we have Hurts. Number 2, Josh Allen. And 3, Mahomes. I mean, Mahomes was pretty solid. He had 19.5 points. But, I mean, come on. You also really can't predict the fact that he had a pick 6 because Kadarius Toney literally dropped the ball that I think I could have done a better job. At least if I was out there instead of Kadarius Toney, the ball would have just went straight through my hands into my skull and killed me because Mahomes was just throwing that ball at, 70 miles an hour. But at least I wouldn't lose fantasy points for my savior Mahomes because I somehow tipped the ball up in the air and caused Mahomes to get a pick 6 on a perfectly good pass. So that's kind of unlucky. You can't really predict that. And of course, we had Sky Moore, who, I'm a Sky Moore hater. I'm sorry. I guess we're going to bring on later on. It's probably not going to like that. He's a big Sky Moore truther. But Sky Moore was trash. I mean, we had Justin Watson being the number 1 target, basically. Receive rights, catch a few balls, catch a touchdown. I mean, Mahomes is playing with absolute bozos. He is like LeBron on the Cavs because he's the GOAT and carrying a bunch of bums. There, I said it. But anyway, now I'm done ranting about how trash the weapons Mahomes has. Obviously, Kelsey missed, so we kind of knew that heading into this ranking, but still. I mean, Hurts has the upside to be the QB1 every week. I have him as my QB1 in fantasy. He's going up against New England. I think this should be a low-scoring contest to an extent, Hurts wins from running the ball a lot of time anyway, and I think he has the opportunity to do that in this game. Allen's going up against the Jets, who honestly I think should be a shootout. So again, like I talked about Diggs and Wilson, I bumped Allen above Mahomes for that reason. Dropping down to our next tier, we have Justin Fields and Lamar Jackson. I know before you called me a biased Bears fan, hear me out. I have Fields ahead of Lamar this season because the signs are just there that Fields obviously has the upside to do what Jalen Hurts did last season with a revamped offense, a new wide receiver one, and rushing upside. I think Fields is a very talented player. We know his arm strength is good. I don't know where the narrative that he's a bad passer. He's just not a consistent passer at the NFL level because he doesn't have the opportunity to throw to good receivers that aren't Byron Pringle and Amon-Ra St. Brown the third, and I don't even know what's his name? Equanimous St. Brown? Yeah, his brother. I'm sorry. Equanimous honestly seems like a pretty cool guy. He does podcasts, so I feel pretty bad now. I literally forgot his name too. But the bottom line is Fields should be stepping into his prime, and Lamar, yes, he has the upside that we are chasing, and he was the MVP, best player in fantasy football in 2019, but his rushing production has decreased every year. I expect Fields to go upwards every year, and it seems like Lamar is decreasing even with that new contract, new offense. I think him passing the ball more is actually going to hurt him. Although he might be better from a real-life perspective, I don't see him getting back to that elite rushing upside that I project for Fields going into this season. So next we have Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow. I mean, not really much to say. I feel like they are ranked here the rest of the season. You kind of got to start him at this tier. We have Herbert going to a shootout, and I have Burrow ahead of Herbert on the year, so pretty similar, but I moved Herbert above Burrow due to the situation. That brings me to my start of the week, which is Tua, and I really like Tua overall, but again, he's playing the Chargers. Should be a shootout. Tua's very talented. I mean, anytime you're looking at a high-scoring game, he has Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle. He's an elite deep ball passer, which allows him to break the game open at any point in the game. So I like Tua. He has all upside in the world. He's going to a great situation, and I expect a bounce back for him, not only this game, but the rest of the season. And let's just talk about Deshaun Watson, Daniel Jones, Kirk Cousins. Watson, I'm just putting him here based on upside. I really don't know why. If you're starting a low-end QB1, you should be going after a guy like Kirk Cousins because, yes, Kirk Cousins is good. If you have to start him and you're loaded everywhere else, I understand. But he's probably going to just stay at that QB12 range, and that's not really going to win you your league. Deshaun Watson, yeah, I understand if you want to wait and see how he plays, but he has rushing upside, and he's upside to be a top 5 QB in fantasy. Daniel Jones, same reason why. He is a good player. I think he's pretty underrated, and he also has rushing upside, which bumps him up above Kirk Cousins. But that's the top 12 QBs. I'm high in Tagovailoa. And other than that, I mean, you kind of just have to break it up into small tiers of QBs 2 through 3. We have either, like a Fields and Lamar type tier, 2 more, Herbert Burrow type tier, 2 more, and so on. So I wouldn't really make tiers much larger than that. Those are kind of the players that are rather interchangeable, but let's dive into the tight end rankings next. So with the tight end rankings, I wrote this on Thursday, assuming that Kelsey will be out. The game is now over and confirmed that Kelsey is out, so doesn't ruin my tier list, thankfully. But we have TJ Hawkinson as the tight end 1 in a tier alone. I've just been seeing some issues with Mark Andrews injury-wise, and on top of this, he's going up against the Texans, which sounds great. The Texans are terrible, but they really shouldn't be passing the ball much. They're going to probably be able to spread the ball around because everyone should be getting open against the Texans. They're not really going to throw the ball much in the second half. And if Andrews has been dealing with injuries, if it's not a close game, I don't see why they're going to push him and make him be an extremely involved part of the game plan. Hawkinson I have higher than Andrews the rest of the season. And the reason is simply that Hawkinson is just, he seems like he's going into his prime, and Andrews was great, but it seems like he's just on the decline. And Andrews is facing more target competition than ever. Not only does he have to deal with Odell Beckham, Zay Flowers, And then obviously you have like Rashad Bateman and J.K. Dobbins potentially could be involved as a pass catcher, but these are all much bigger upgrades than what they've ever had besides Hollywood Brown, who I think is a solid player, but I honestly think Odell and Zay Jones could be just as good this season. And they just have more weapons to finally deal with. Lamar isn't an elite passer. Don't hate me. He's good, but he obviously makes his money from running the ball, making plays outside the pocket. So that's that. Hawkinson is stepping into an elite offense. The Vikings should lead the league in passing attempts with the loss of Dalvin Cook. That's just how they run their offense. Keep in mind that Jefferson was double teamed at the highest rate last season, so that should honestly help out Hawkinson. And also, Adam Thielen was there last season and had about 100 plus targets. I love Addison, but he's a rookie, so it's kind of hard to project that he's going to have a crazy number of targets, like 130 plus. He may be more efficient than Thielen. I expect him to be, but the targets, I don't really see him cutting into the work that much more than Thielen did. And in that role, Hawkinson, 14.5 points, coming in immediately. He didn't have time to sit down and learn everything, connect with the team, connect with Kirk Cousins. Now I've had a whole offseason. They can scheme it up, and I have him above Mark Andrews for this upcoming season. Now, for the rest of Tier A, we have Kittle 3, Goddard 4, Waller 5. All great options, I think. At the tight end position, which is kind of a crapshoot, these are the top guys. You have to start no matter what. I mean, Kittle, we will be monitoring that injury, but I'm assuming he plays. I think he has more upside, and I have him higher on my rankings than Goddard and Waller. We'll have to see how Waller does. If he has a good week, I could definitely see bumping him up higher than that. But we also have Kyle Pitts, Njoku, Higbee, Frymouth, and Ingram. But let's just talk about Higbee for a second. I've loved Higbee this whole offseason, and Cooper Kupp isn't playing. So Seattle has been historically terrible against tight ends. They were second worst in PPR points allowed last season. And Higbee has drawn over 100 targets for one of the first times last season. He's going to be targeted. Stafford has no one else, and he's pretty underrated. I think the Rams should throw the ball a lot. They're going to be trailing against the Seahawks, so Higbee's going to be that number one guy, and he should eat based on volume alone this week. Then we have Everett and Kmet. Everett is a solid player. You know, he's talented. He's going into a shootout with the Chargers, and I really like this ranking here. Tight end, again, I would just say start your top guys, and then Higbee has a good week. Obviously, Kyle Pitts and Njoku should pop off as well. I don't mind Frymouth and Ingram, but Higbee is my start of the week at the tight end position. So that's going to wrap up talking about rankings. Normally, I would cut more time into talking about, buy, sell, sit, starts, but we don't really have that much information because obviously we've only had one game so far, but I'm going to be cutting more time for sit, starts, not diving as deep into these rankings, kind of going over the sit, starts in that context like I kind of just did, but I'll integrate it more. And then once we have our guests, we'll be able to pick their brain more as well. So if you want more in-depth analysis for future, we will be posting a lot of that content on my Substack, which you can get articles on that if you want. If you want to have every article before kickoff, you can subscribe to my Substack, and I will have the face-off articles, which I mentioned before, will be listed on the website. We'll have those quarterback, wide receiver, running back, tight end rankings up there, and then a little breakdown of who the player you should start the most is. That said, let's wrap up this episode. This episode will be a little more edited because it's by myself. Videos and podcasts that are like this going forward, I'm not going to be doing every single episode with a guest, so I kind of want to have that mixture of, the podcast strict type field where it's basically unedited. But for YouTube users, I also want to have more edited content sprinkled in there as well. But again, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe if you guys are excited for football season. I know I am. And more future videos, be sure to like, comment, subscribe. Any question you have, anything you want to talk about for next episode. And thank you guys so much. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe. And I'll see you guys in next week's edition of the Fantasy Trading Room.